From KAMR Local 4 News, your local election headquarters, this is Politics Today.
Millions of people are now without SNAP benefits for November, the organization stepping in to help. And after a second vote on water rights for Fermi America from the city of Amarillo, we're diving into what this facility will do for our community. More than 40 million Americans are on the SNAP program, and those 40 million are now without their November benefits due to the government shutdown. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'm Mari Farrell. Nearly 30,000 are right here in Potter and Randall County. Friday, 2 federal judges ruled that the USDA has to continue funding this program. No word on how soon that could actually happen, though. These rulings are likely to face appeals. There's legislation proposed that could fund the SNAP program. It's supported by 10 GOP members, including Senators John Cornyn and James Lankford, a bill that Democratic leaders say the party may vote for. There is a similar piece of legislation introduced in the U.S. House. Meanwhile, 3.5 million Texans, according to the High Plains Food Bank, will be impacted by this delay. Politics Today's Princess Bryant explains the impact, especially for a group that some may tend to forget about.
The federal government is in shutdown for its 4th week, leading to federal workers being furloughed and delaying SNAP benefits for around 42 million in the country.
1 in 11 people here in the Texas Panhandle that could see their SNAP benefits disrupted for November. So that's a lot of our neighbors that won't be receiving benefits as long as the shutdown continues.
Wilson adds that the food bank has seen one of the highest needs in their history this year, and the delay in benefits will only increase that need.
It has not slowed down since the beginning of the year. It has increased. We're seeing over 13,000 households a month on average that we are helping to assist in our 29 county service area.
The SNAP program helps low-income families receive benefits for groceries, but also helps seniors, people with disabilities, and children in the foster care system.
Historically, children in the foster care system are considered homeless, right, by statute. And so this directly affects how much funding they will get to support children in the foster care system. So, right, less funding for food and items like that means less nourishment, less possibilities for our children, which is always concerning.
Garcia adds that his biggest concern is the children aging out of the foster care system because delay in SNAP cuts can impact them heavily.
It really changes the dynamic for the children that are aging out of the foster care system. So those 18 to 24-year-olds don't have benefits anymore, whereas typically they would still have SNAP benefits as they're getting into adulthood, as they're going through college, or as they're trying to figure out next steps.
Wilson adds during the government shutdown, the food bank is hard at work to make sure that families are still getting food so every Texan can be fed.
It's a community-wide effort to step up and meet these needs, and that's what the Texas Panhandle is all about, stepping up to help meet needs. And so we know that that's going to happen, and but there definitely is an urgency now, I think, more than ever.
In Amarillo, Princess Bryant, KAMR Local 4 News.
The Trump administration says the release of contingency funds would be illegal. More than a dozen states have filed a lawsuit against the administration, arguing it's illegal to end the benefits. We have a full list of restaurants across our viewing area helping during the delay in benefits, along with the current legislation and how they are working to fund the program on myhighplains.com. The Carson County Commissioners Court approving a tax abatement agreement with Fermi Inc. during their recent meeting. Through the approved tax abatement deal, Carson County is getting paid for every megawatt produced and every square foot they build. Politics Today's Maya Clark has a story.
Carson County and Fermi Inc. coming to terms on an abatement agreement after months of discussion.
We structured it per megawatt on like we do a lot of our wind turbines and our solar farms. Abatements are always done on the megawatts.
Luton says the plan is to build a 1 million square foot building in phases.
Because a 1 million square feet building right now, it's not been done in the data center world. If it doesn't happen, if maybe 100 million square foot building isn't the right way to go. Maybe smaller buildings would go. But we know they're going to produce electricity, and we know they got to sell that electricity to the data centers.
According to Luton, the abatement agreed to is for 15 phases.
When they complete so many buildings and so much generation, We'll have a COD on that portion of that phase, and that phase will go into a 10-year abatement agreement.
The way the abatement is structured is to complete one project a year. Under this structure, portions of the data center and generation could be under abatement for the next 25 years.
I think we're going to be very pleased in the future. I think they're going to be good partners.
Fermi Inc. community lead Trent Sizemore shared they've received positive feedback from the community, especially when considering the long-term impact of property taxes.
This really means down the road that citizens in Carson County may not even have to pay any property tax, that someone else is going to be paying that tax for me, and that's Fermi in this situation.
Lewin says even if the data center isn't fully built out, Carson County will still be covered with this agreement. The Amarillo City Council approves a water deal with Fermi America. They agreed to using up to 2.5 million gallons of water a day and agreed to pay twice the amount that citizens pay to use it. But a lot of people are still asking, what is this company and what will they be doing once built? Politics Today's Blas Guerrero has more details on how it works and what company officials are saying about its impact on the Panhandle.
The Fermi America Data Center aims to become one of the largest of its kind in the world with an 11-gigawatt power campus that will produce its own energy to run artificial intelligence.
If you were powering New York City, it's times 2 is 11 gigawatts of power. For other perspective, the Hoover Dam is 2 gigawatts of power. And we're on the record in our S11 saying we plan to have that by 2027.
Fermi officials say the project's private grid will rely first on natural gas, solar, and eventually nuclear energy. Fermi says they could potentially be exporting electricity to Xcel Energy.
It's a win that we'll be exporting potentially excess electricity to them and importing electricity from them. Long term, there's a very good chance that we're, especially with our solar ambitions, we're actually a net importer into the Xcel grid.
The data center will use computer servers to process large amounts of data for AI research, businesses, and national security. Officials say it's designed to help the U.S. compete globally in what they call the AI arms race.
We're behind, as Governor Perry has said, and we've got to catch up if we want to control the future of information. And that's what we're talking about here is data. While it's AI and everything, none of us fully grasp where all that's headed, but it's information.
Fermi says the goal is to make the Panhandle a key player in the growing global competition for AI and data dominance.
Fermi says once construction begins, it could take up to 10 years to fully complete. Officials hope to have 1 gigawatt of power online by the end of 2026. Fermi officials say once development begins, the project will unfold over the next decade. We've got that full interview with the Fermi representative, plus more about this project at myhighplains.com. Millions will have a tougher time getting the food they need due to the SNAP benefits being cut for November. We'll hear from Oklahoma Senator James Lankford about what lawmakers are doing to help and about the government shutdown. As the government shutdown continues, millions of families are now without some much-needed SNAP benefits. On top of that, we're weeks out from Thanksgiving. We spoke with Oklahoma Senator James Lankford about what lawmakers are doing to help these families.
You touched a little bit on the SNAP issue. Now, as far as the SNAP funding bill, can you provide an update on that and an outlook? Do you think it's likely to pass?
Yeah, we've had 13 different votes to be able to reopen the government, even short term. We had a full vote last week to be able to fully fund SNAP for the year. Democrats all voted against that bill. Now some Democrats are saying we want short-term funding for SNAP or maybe a few weeks funding for SNAP to be able to drag this on. I don't anticipate that's going to move either. The same problem is still there. If they want to fund SNAP, they're still not funding Head Start. They're still not funding air traffic controllers. They're still not funding USDA. They're still cutting off everything else on it. And so our focus has been, okay, enough is enough with all the different games they're trying to play. Let's just get the government back open again. This has been a very painful process for a lot of people across the country. If you're directly trying to connect with the federal government, whether it be talking to the IRS or calling USDA about some question, no one's getting answers anymore because so many people are furloughed. It's time to be able to solve this.
Okay. And Senator, you're one of 10 GOP members who are supporting the SNAP funding bill. Can you kind of talk about some of the details inside it?
Yeah, we had actually lined up a whole bunch of different options, starting with can we pay just everyone that's working right now, and then can we pay the military? Can we provide SNAP? We lined up all these different options to say, what can we do at this point? And we started some of those last week. My Democratic colleagues voted against those even last week. Our proposal is let's just try to get the whole government open at this point, because even if there's SNAP funding or temporary SNAP funding, my concern is that we'll go right back into another shutdown all over again at this point. But I definitely want to be able to see this government open. I definitely want to see SNAP funding. President Trump has the flexibility to be able to do what's called the WIC funding, the Women, Infants, and Children's funding. He has some flexibility in that and has been able to fund that. He's found a way to be able to take research and development dollars in the military and to be able to fund members of the military and their pay. So the president's working to try to keep as many things operating as we can. But with the government shutdown, it's not infinite on that. There's no allocated funds in different areas. We've got to get allocated funds long term.
Democrats continue to say their only goal is to get the ACA subsidies extended. People are deciding right now if they can afford their health care and are seeing the premiums double and even triple without those subsidies continuing. The USDA also had allocated funds for SNAP in their first contingency plan before the shutdown. The administration now says using those contingency funds would be illegal. As the shutdown continues, we also spoke with Texas Senator Ted Cruz and New Mexico Representative Teresa Leger Fernandez. Hear what they have to say after the break. The government has been shut down for more than 30 days. Workers are going without paychecks. People will soon struggle to buy food and necessities. Our D.C. Bureau spoke with Texas Senator John Cornyn and New Mexico Representative Teresa Leger Fernandez.
Senator Cornyn, I'll start with your bill to bring back funding for SNAP benefits during this government shutdown. Why do you think that's a good idea?
Well, there are 40 million people roughly who depend on this safety net program, and as a result of the government shutdown, that's no longer going to be available after November the 1st. So I thought it was important to at least try to start the conversation about how we can eliminate this vulnerable population as collateral damage from this mistaken, misguided, really dumb shutdown.
And have you gotten any feedback from leadership about whether they think that's a good idea, whether they'll bring it to the floor?
Well, I think the House, as you know, has done its job. They've passed a short-term continuing resolution, a stopgap spending bill to keep us open until November the 21st. But then we're back in the soup. We've got the same problem all over again.
Mexicans are very concerned because 1 in 5 New Mexicans relies on those benefits. And we know that those benefits don't just feed the hungry. They also create economic activity in their area, like 1.8 times. So for every dollar spent, you get about almost $2 worth of economic activity because you're buying from farmers, ranchers, from grocery stores. Everybody in a community relies on that money. Remember, when I was hungry, you gave me to eat. President Trump has $5 billion at a minimum available at USDA to fund food benefits. It's sitting there precisely for an instance like this, to fund food benefits. President Trump is refusing to give somebody to eat when they are hungry. He is acting against everybody's moral values, I think, because the money is sitting there. He has the authority to do it. Congress sent the money over to USDA in advance so it would be available in a situation like a shutdown.
Cornyn and Senator Lankford are among 10 GOP members who support legislation in the Senate to fund SNAP. It's legislation that top Democrats say they'd probably vote for. They're just waiting for that legislation to be brought to the floor. Amarillo is starting to get more Democratic candidates making campaign stops, including a well-known state lawmaker who kicked off his campaign in Amarillo. Plus, the GOP candidate for Texas Attorney General also made a stop in the city. We've got those stories next. A Texas lawmaker brought his campaign for the U.S. Senate seat to Amarillo this week. Politics Today's Blas Guerrero has more details on how State Representative James Tallarico is sharing his message of change and unity.
To those who love this state, to those who love this country, to those who love our neighbors, it's time to start flipping tables.
Supporters gathered in Amarillo as State Representative James Tallarico made his case for why he should be the next U.S. Senator of Texas.
I want to be a senator for all 30 million Texans, and I want to be a senator for everyone in the Panhandle, whether they're a Democrat, an independent, or a Republican. I want to fight for working people all over Amarillo, all over the Panhandle.
Tallarico says his campaign is focused on taking on billionaires and helping the working class, including ranchers and farmers.
I already have talked to 2 ranchers here in line who have talked about how this recent initiative by the administration to help people in Argentina is actually hurting ranchers, cattle ranchers here in the Panhandle. So you're going to hear me talking about this issue a lot on the campaign trail. We need a U.S. Senator who's going to fight for ranchers all across Texas.
Local Democratic leaders say Tallarico's visit is part of a growing effort to making the Panhandle's voice heard in state and national politics.
Like that the voices of the Panhandle have been lost, not just with the Democrats, but also with the Republicans. They just don't listen to the Panhandle. We don't exist anymore. And so by having Representative Tallarico up here, so we are putting Amarillo back on the map.
Tallarico says his goal is bridging divides and giving working families a stronger voice in government.
On the Democratic primary ticket, 5 are running for the Senate seat, including U.S. Representative Colin Allred. And on the Republican side, about 13 are running, including incumbent Senator John Cornyn and current Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. Local Democratic leaders say they hope more statewide candidates will continue to make stops in the Panhandle. The primary election is in Texas on March 3rd. We have Representative Tallarico's full remarks on our website, myhighplains.com. Also in Amarillo tonight was Mays Middleton. He's a GOP candidate for Texas Attorney General. Middleton considers himself a steadfast ally of President Trump, with experience in the oil and gas industry and the farm and ranch industry. Mays' website notes he served 2 terms in the Texas House and served in the Texas Senate. Middleton is on a ballot with Joan Huffman, Aaron Reitz, and current U.S. Congressman Chip Roy on the GOP side. So far, Joe Jaworski and Nathan Johnson are on the Democratic side. And again, the primary election is coming up on March 3rd. Current AG Ken Paxton is running for a U.S. Senate seat against Senator John Cornyn. Congressman Ronnie Jackson has filed another lawsuit against the state of California for their redistricting efforts. An Amarillo judge ruled recently he wouldn't be hurt if California voters say yes to the measure. Jackson and a lawmaker from California argue their resources, ability to serve, and authority would be diluted, lost, or impaired if California redistricts in favor of Democrats. Texas lawmakers voted to redistrict in favor of Republicans a few months ago. Jackson claims the act passed in California, which is now before their voters, is unconstitutional. California's redistricting measure follows their state law, which would temporarily grant the legislature the ability to redistrict if approved by voters. It was a busy Amarillo City Council meeting this week. We've got some other items the council voted on. We'll wrap the politics today after this. Amarillo City Council had another marathon meeting this week. A big portion of it was about Fermi America, but they did take up some other important items. So let's go ahead and talk about what happened. Council is considering leasing the Amarillo Zoo to the Wild West Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. Founder Stephanie Brady presented her plan to the council. No vote was taken. She wants to set this up as a nonprofit, keep on the staff who want to stay, and enhance security and explain the backstory for the animals there.
As a community, how lucky are we that we have a zoo here? It's the only zoo for over 50 counties. And having that opportunity to bring our kids to see these animals, not just in a textbook, but up close. We want it to be a place that people are proud of and they want to visit on a regular basis.
Brady is expected to have a more in-depth proposition at the council's November meeting. The council also approved an economic development program agreement for the Herring Hotel. The project would renovate the historic structure into a hotel, featuring 226 guest rooms, 2 restaurants, a pool deck, and a rooftop bar and other amenities. The project is expected to cost around $100 million. This passed in a 4-0 vote, with Councilman Tim Reed abstaining. Stay up on the latest of political news with us this week. You can have some more stories on myhighplains.com. Have a good Sunday.